The dust hangs in the dry savanna air like a fine golden mist, settling over a landscape that stretches for hundreds of miles toward the jagged horizon of the Great Rift Valley. It is a world governed by ancient and unforgiving rhythms, where the afternoon temperature regularly crests at 105 degrees Fahrenheit, baking the earth into a fractured mosaic of cracked clay and withered scrub brush. In this vast and silent emptiness, the Maasai herders move with the deliberate, quiet grace of people who have survived alongside these elements for millennia. Their traditional red garments, the woven shukas, strike a vivid, blood-colored contrast against the pale, dying grass of the dry season. The elder, Lanana, leans his weight upon his polished wooden staff, his deeply lined face turned upward, his eyes tracing the invisible pathways of the stars that are just beginning to emerge in the purple twilight. For generations beyond counting, his people have looked upward to the ancient silver light of the moon to divine the shifting of the winds, the coming of the rains, and the hidden locations of the surviving green pastures. But tonight, a drastically different light pierces the gathering darkness of the wilderness. It is not the soft, ancient glow of celestial bodies, but the sharp, cold, unblinking blue radiance of a digital screen. A few yards away from the protective thornbush enclosure of the cattle boma, a young herder named Kantai crouches beside a squat, metallic satellite receiver dish. The device points rigidly toward the heavens, silently communicating with a massive constellation of low-Earth orbit machines speeding thousands of miles above the quiet savanna. The silver dish is an alien artifact resting in this timeless terrain, its sleek white surface already gathering the fine dust of the valley, its thick black cables snaking through the dry dirt like artificial veins tapping into the earth. As Kantai swipes his finger across the glass surface of a ruggedized tablet, the blue light illuminates his face, casting deep, unnatural shadows that dance against the backdrop of the ancient landscape. This is the exact physical intersection of two vastly different eras, a profound visual moment where the deep time of ancestral memory directly collides with the instantaneous transmission of high-bandwidth data. The silence of the evening remains profound, broken only by the rhythmic shifting of 1,000 cattle hooves and the low, rattling breaths of animals that have walked 15 miles today without finding a single drop of water. Lanana watches the blue light of the screen with a stoic, unreadable expression. He does not fear the machine, but he deeply understands the heavy weight of its sudden presence in their lives. The vast sky above them holds the sacred stories of his ancestors, the specific lunar cycles that have dictated the life and death of the herd for countless centuries. The small glowing glass rectangle in Kantai's rough hands holds the cold, hard mathematics of a modern world that is rapidly closing in on all sides. The collision is entirely silent, yet it resonates with the heavy force of a thunderclap across the shadowed plains. As the moon rises higher, casting its ancient silver net over the sleeping cattle, the harsh blue glare of the tablet remains fixed and relentless. It is a stark beacon of a new reality, demanding absolute attention, demanding a fundamental shift in the very fabric of their survival. The elders continue to rely on the distant stars, while the young continue to rely on the immediate screen. The great drought is coming, the heat is rising, and the true test of this fragile new coexistence is just about to begin. The morning sun rises with a fierce and punishing intensity, instantly pushing the temperature toward 100 degrees Fahrenheit and stripping away the fleeting cool relief of the night. The reality of the drought is visible in every direction. The landscape is bleached of all color, reduced to harsh shades of brown and brittle gray. For the herd to survive, they must constantly move, following a strict migratory logic that Lanana has memorized through decades of walking this exact terrain. He remembers the historical patterns of the clouds, the subtle changes in the direction of the wind, and the specific phases of the moon that always signaled which distant valleys would hold the vital, life-saving grass. He reads the natural world like an open scroll, interpreting the behavior of the birds and the smell of the dry earth. But the earth is changing. The reliable rains of his youth now fail with terrifying frequency, and the ancient signs occasionally point to valleys that are now completely barren. Beside the thorn bushes, Kantai packs up the satellite dish, carefully securing the delicate metal components into a heavy leather bag. He boots up the ruggedized tablet, allowing the low Earth orbit connection to stream real-time vegetation indices directly to his hands. On the glowing screen, a detailed topographical map of their ancestral lands appears, overlaid with vibrant patches of green, yellow, and red. Kantai stares at the pixels, realizing that the traditional grazing route Lanana is preparing to take is completely blanketed in bright, warning red. The satellite sensors, scanning the Earth from outer space, confirm that there is absolutely no living vegetation in the northern corridor. The blue light of the screen reflects in Kantai's dark eyes as he approaches the elder. He holds out the device, presenting the high-tech map to a man who has always navigated by the vast sky. The visual juxtaposition is deeply striking. The complex digital rendering of the Earth glowing in the hands of a young man draped in traditional beads and red cloth. Lanana looks down at the tablet, his face remaining perfectly calm, though his mind turns over the profound implications of the glowing colors. He does not dismiss the tool, but he views it through the lens of profound skepticism. How can a piece of glass, a machine that does not breathe the dusty air or feel the burning sun on its skin, know the land better than a man who has bled into its soil? The digital map lacks the texture of reality. It does not show the hidden predators, the deep ravines, or the spirits of the ancestors that guard the watering holes. Kantai respectfully explains the shifting weather patterns visualized on the screen, translating the high-bandwidth data into the language of their shared survival. The tension between them is not born of anger, but of a desperate, shared need to keep their cattle alive. The herd is their entire world, their wealth, their history, and their future. If they make the wrong choice today, the bones of 1,000 animals will bleach beneath the unforgiving sun by the end of the month. The ancient lunar rhythms demand a march to the north, honoring the sacred cycle of the seasons. The real-time data strictly demands a march to the east, chasing an isolated storm cell that dropped heavy rain 2 days prior. Two entirely different epistemologies now stand face to face in the sweltering heat of the savannah, waiting for a resolution that will permanently alter the trajectory of their ancient culture. As the midday sun reaches its absolute peak, casting harsh vertical shadows beneath the sparse acacia trees, the internal conflict begins to ripple quietly through the rest of the community. The elders of the village gather beneath the wide canopy of the oldest tree, sitting in a loose circle on the parched earth. They speak in low, deliberate tones, their voices carrying the immense weight of historical authority. They recount the devastating droughts of the past, the years when the rivers dried to cracked mud, and the people survived only by trusting the sacred wisdom passed down through generations. To abandon the lunar cycles now, in their moment of greatest peril, feels to some like an unforgivable betrayal of the ancestors who mapped this land with their own footsteps. On the periphery of this gathering, the younger warriors and herders stand in a quiet cluster, their eyes frequently darting toward Kantai and the leather bag that holds the satellite dish. They respect the elders deeply, but they also see the ribs showing through the hides of their cattle. They feel the desperate urgency of the immediate present, an urgency that the real-time satellite imagery specifically addresses. Kantai powers on the tablet again, shielding the screen from the glaring sun with his hand. The blue light is fainter in the daylight, but its presence is intensely magnetic. The young men lean in, studying the pixelated terrain, pointing to the green spots that represent salvation. The divide within the community is not loud or violent. It is a slow-burn tension, a heavy silence that thickens the already oppressive air. The technology has inadvertently introduced a powerful wedge into a society that relies on absolute, unbreakable cohesion. The satellite dish, metallic and foreign, sits silently in the center of the camp, an inanimate object that has suddenly become the most powerful force in their lives. It does not issue commands, it does not speak, yet it forcefully challenges the foundation of their traditional reality. Lanana watches the younger men from his place beneath the tree. He observes their fascination with the screen, noting how the device demands their downward gaze, pulling their eyes away from the vast horizon and the expansive sky. He feels the heavy burden of leadership pressing down upon his shoulders. He knows that a fractured community will quickly perish in this harsh environment. The elders argue that the digital map is an illusion, a trick of light that cannot guarantee the presence of actual water or safe passage. The younger men argue that the old ways are blind to the new climate reality, that the weather has fundamentally broken its ancient promises. The debate is spoken not in shouts, but in long, meaningful pauses, a chess match of philosophies played out on the burning edge of human endurance. Every hour that passes under the brutal sun drains more life from the herd. The internal friction is agonizing, a quiet tearing of the cultural fabric that threatens to unravel thousands of years of shared identity. They must find a way to reconcile the deep time of the moon with the fast time of the machine, or they will completely fracture beneath the immense pressure of the dry earth. The external pressure of the environment rapidly escalates, tightening its merciless grip around the fragile community. By the third day of the standoff, the heat rises to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, an oppressive, suffocating blanket that makes every breath feel like inhaling fire. A massive dust storm sweeps across the valley, a towering wall of brown particulate that blots out the sun and turns the daytime sky into a dark, suffocating twilight. The harsh wind howls through the thorn bushes, driving sharp grains of sand into the skin and eyes of the herders. When the storm finally passes, the devastation is clear. The small, muddy watering hole they had relied upon is completely choked with dry earth, leaving nothing but a cracked depression in the ground. The cattle sound a collective, mournful lowing, a desperate sound that reverberates deep within the chests of the Maasai. The animals are rapidly losing pounds of body weight each day. Their hip bones protrude sharply, and their heavy heads droop toward the barren soil. The nearest known permanent water source is located 50 miles away, a brutal march that will surely kill the weakest calves and the oldest cows. The stakes of their debate have abruptly transitioned from theoretical philosophy to immediate life and death. The environment is the ultimate, unyielding antagonist, entirely indifferent to their traditions or their technology. Kantai wipes the thick dust from the surface of the satellite dish, quickly re-establishing the connection to the machines orbiting overhead. The tablet screen glows with its signature blue light, casting a sharp contrast against the dusty, brown devastation of the camp. The updated weather data is grim. The heat wave will absolutely continue for another 2 weeks. The green zone Kantai had identified to the east is shrinking rapidly under the punishing sun. They have a very narrow window of time to reach it before the grass completely withers and dies. Lanana stands amidst the suffering herd, his hands gently resting on the flank of his lead bull. He feels the rapid, shallow heartbeat of the animal, feeling the life slowly draining away. The external pressure is a vice, squeezing out any remaining luxury of hesitation. The reality of the changing climate is undeniable. The landscape he once knew intimately has been violently rearranged by global forces entirely outside of their control. The sacred migration routes are now completely severed by newly formed deserts and unpredictable weather systems. The tension reaches a dangerous boiling point. The community looks to Lanana, waiting for the final word. The massive satellite dish, with its silver curves and complex wires, stands as a stark monument to modernity in the middle of a dying, ancient world. It offers a singular promise of survival, but it demands that they trust an invisible network of machines over the tangible reality of the earth beneath their feet. The survival of the entire Maasai lineage in this specific valley hangs by a terrifyingly thin thread, stretched to the absolute breaking point by the relentless, baking heat. The climax of competing ideas finally arrives as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in deep, bruised shades of purple and orange. Lanana calls for a final gathering, bringing Kantai and the glowing tablet to the center of the circle. The time for silent deliberation is completely over. Lanana uses his wooden staff to draw a large, sweeping map in the soft dust of the earth. He traces the ancient path to the southern river valley, marking the locations of the hidden springs and the shaded resting places that his grandfather had shown him. He points to the rising moon, using its precise angle in the sky to validate his intended route. It is a brilliant, masterful demonstration of ancestral knowledge, an intricate mental map built from centuries of observation and deep survival. Kantai steps forward, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. He holds the tablet down near the dust map, creating a profound visual collision between the deep grooves drawn in the dirt and the crisp, illuminated pixels of the high-tech display. Kantai points to the exact southern valley Lanana has just drawn. On the digital screen, that specific area is glowing in a severe dark red color. Kantai explains that the satellite sensors detect absolutely zero moisture in the soil there. A localized drought has completely decimated the southern route. If they march the herd 50 miles to the south, they will march directly into a graveyard. Instead, Kantai swipes the screen, pulling the map toward the jagged eastern ridges. There, glowing in a bright, unmistakable green, is a small plateau that recently caught the edge of a rogue rainstorm. It is a path they rarely travel, a difficult and steep terrain, but the data insists that it holds the only surviving grass within a 100-mile radius. Lanana looks from the glowing green pixels to the dust map at his feet, and then up to the ancient silver face of the moon. The climax of tension rests entirely in this silent evaluation. The elder must physically weigh the sacred history of his bloodline against a fragile piece of glass and wire. If he rejects the technology, he risks the total annihilation of his people out of stubborn pride. If he blindly accepts the machine, he risks destroying the spiritual foundation of the Maasai, turning his people into mere followers of a foreign screen. The blue light and the silver moonlight fiercely battle for dominance in the quiet camp. The elders murmur in the background, fully realizing that the outcome of this specific moment will define the future of their entire civilization. The tablet hums quietly, a low-frequency sound that seems to vibrate through the dry air. Kantai does not push the screen into the face of the elder. He simply holds it steady, offering the information as a tool, leaving the ultimate agency entirely in the hands of the indigenous leadership. The choice is a terrifying precipice. Late into the deep night, when the camp falls into an exhausted slumber, Lanana walks out into the open savanna completely alone. The temperature has finally dropped, but the dry wind continues to whip across the plains, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The elder seeks the total silence of the wilderness to confront the profound crisis of his own faith. He stands isolated beneath the vast, sprawling canopy of the Milky Way, looking up at the countless stars that have guided his every footstep since he was a young boy. He searches the constellations for a clear sign, a familiar pattern that will tell him the digital machine is wrong and the old ways are still absolute. But as he stands in the darkness, looking at the withered brush surrounding him, a heavy, painful realization washes over his spirit. The sky has not betrayed him, nor have the ancestors lied to him. It is the earth itself that has fundamentally changed. The modern world has altered the very breath of the planet, shifting the rains and heating the soil beyond recognition. The ancient maps stored in his mind were perfectly accurate for a world that simply no longer exists. To stubbornly follow the old paths in a changed world is not an act of honoring the ancestors. It is an act of foolishness that will lead to death. The survival of the Maasai has always depended on their incredible ability to adapt, to observe the reality of the environment and move in harmony with it. He realizes that the low Earth orbit satellite is not an enemy sent to destroy their culture. It is a new kind of eye, capable of seeing the altered world from a vantage point that human beings can never achieve. The crisis of faith breaks, slowly replaced by a deep, pragmatic wisdom. Lanana understands that the strength of his people does not reside in blindly repeating the past, but in carrying the sacred spirit of the past into the necessary actions of the present. He turns his gaze back toward the sleeping camp. In the distance, he can see the faint, metallic silhouette of the satellite dish glinting slightly under the pale moonlight. It no longer looks like an alien artifact to him. It looks like a strange, new tree taking root in their soil. He makes his decision quietly in the dark, fully accepting the heavy burden of consequence. He will not surrender their soul to the machine, but he will certainly harness its vision. He breathes in the cool night air, feeling a sudden clarity settle over his mind. The path forward is physically dangerous and culturally unprecedented, but it is the only path that leads to life. The elder turns and walks slowly back toward the boma, ready to forge a new synthesis between the ancient earth and the digital sky. As dawn breaks over the jagged horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of gold and pink, Lanana summons the entire community to the center of the camp. The air is entirely still, pregnant with the heavy anticipation of his final ruling. Kantai stands near the satellite dish, holding the ruggedized tablet loosely at his side. Lanana steps forward, holding his wooden staff firmly in his right hand. He does not point to the dust map, nor does he immediately point to the sky. Instead, he speaks with a clear, resonant voice that commands absolute attention. He acknowledges the profound severity of the drought, validating the deep fears of both the elders and the youth. He honors the ancestors, speaking their names into the morning air, firmly grounding the community in their shared identity. Then, he deliberately walks over to Kantai and gestures toward the tablet. The indigenous community will make the ultimate decision. The technology will strictly serve them, not rule them. Lanana announces to the gathered crowd that the environment has changed, that the old trails to the south are currently dead. He proclaims that the satellite dish is simply a new tool, a modern extension of their own watchful eyes. He points to the sky and states that the machine overhead is merely a new, fast-moving star, placed into the heavens by human hands, but interpreted strictly through the wisdom of the Maasai. They will integrate the high-bandwidth data into their ancient survival strategies. They will not discard their traditional knowledge. They will use it to navigate the treacherous physical terrain on their way to the green plateau located to the east. The decision is met with a unified silence, followed by a collective nod of immense respect from the elders. The tension that had threatened to tear the community apart instantly dissolves, replaced by a focused, urgent determination. Kantai smiles briefly, quickly securing the tablet and beginning the process of breaking down the satellite dish for the long journey. There is no triumphant victory for the technology. It remains appropriately relegated to the status of a helpful instrument. The agency remains entirely and unbreakably with the indigenous people who have chosen, on their own explicit terms, how to adapt. They begin to mobilize the camp, packing their meager belongings and corralling the restless cattle. The synthesis of the old and the new is completely formalized in this morning hour. They will walk the earth exactly as their ancestors did, draped in red shukas and carrying wooden staffs, but their destination will be guided by the invisible signals bouncing from the edge of space down to the dry dust of the Rift Valley. The massive migration begins under the punishing glare of the ascending sun, a grueling, arduous trek across a hostile and unforgiving landscape. The herd stretches out for miles, a long, moving river of bone and hide kicking up a massive plume of golden dust that can be seen from miles away. Lanana leads the procession at the front, using his intimate, encyclopedic knowledge of the physical terrain to navigate the immediate physical obstacles. He knows exactly where the ground is too treacherous for the heavy hooves of the bulls, and he expertly guides them around deep, hidden ravines and dangerous clusters of poisonous brush. His physical leadership is absolutely critical. The digital map can show the ultimate destination, but it cannot safely walk the animals across the broken earth. Several miles behind him, Kantai walks with the ruggedized tablet strapped securely to his chest, periodically checking the downloaded maps to ensure their general heading remains completely true to the eastern plateau. The journey is an agonizing test of physical endurance. The temperature holds steady at 108 degrees Fahrenheit. Calves stumble in the thick dust, their mothers nudging them forward with desperate, low grunts. The herders operate in total synchronization, communicating with sharp whistles and quick hand signals, keeping the massive herd tightly moving forward. The synthesis of their efforts is profoundly beautiful. The deep, ancient wisdom handles the brutal mechanics of the immediate earth, while the modern data holds the promise of the distant future. Hours bleed into days. They march through the blinding heat, conserving every single drop of water, their faces caked in sweat and pale dirt. When the sun beats down relentlessly, causing the horizon to violently shimmer with heat mirages, the young herders trust that the elders know exactly how to pace the animals to prevent total collapse. When the elders begin to doubt the existence of the strange eastern plateau, Kantai shows them the cached satellite images, offering visual proof that salvation truly lies just beyond the next jagged ridge. The physical and the digital are completely intertwined in the struggle for survival. Finally, on the afternoon of the fourth day, a subtle change occurs in the wind. Lanana stops suddenly, raising his head. He smells it before he sees it. The faint, unmistakable scent of damp earth and living vegetation. He points his staff forward, urging the exhausted herd up the final, rocky incline. As they crest the top of the steep ridge, the landscape dramatically opens up before them, revealing a sprawling, hidden plateau covered in thick, vibrant, life-saving green grass. The arrival at the green pastures is entirely silent, lacking any explosive celebration, marked instead by the profound, overwhelming relief of survival. The starving cattle immediately spread out across the plateau, lowering their heavy heads to tear eagerly into the damp, nutritious grass. The sound of thousands of animals grazing fills the cool evening air, a rhythmic, tearing noise that signifies the continuation of their ancient way of life. The herders drop their heavy packs, their bodies aching from the brutal mileage, yet their spirits are entirely lifted by the absolute success of the journey. As the sun rapidly sets behind the distant western mountains, casting long, cool shadows across the newly found sanctuary, the camp begins to settle into its familiar, timeless routine. Kantai carefully unpacks the satellite dish, setting it up near the edge of the plateau to pull down the final weather report for the week. The screen lights up with its sharp blue glow, confirming that the localized moisture will hold for at least another month. Having gathered the necessary information, Kantai does not stare at the screen. He deliberately powers the device down. The sudden absence of the harsh blue light is immediately noticeable. He carefully places the tablet back into its heavy leather bag, treating it with the respect due to a useful tool, but nothing more. Above them, the vast night sky opens up in all its staggering glory. The brilliant silver light of the full moon crests the horizon, casting a soft, ancient luminescence over the entire valley, painting the backs of the grazing cattle in ghostly white hues. Lanana stands near the edge of the herd, leaning heavily on his staff, bathing in the familiar moonlight. The technology did not arrive to act as a savior. It merely offered vital information that the community utilized through their own sovereign will. The indigenous agency reigns completely supreme. They faced the terrifying collision of tradition and modernity, and they actively chose a path that preserved their deep connection to the land while successfully navigating the severe realities of a changing climate. The ancient lunar cycles will still be taught, the stories of the stars will still be sung, but the sky now holds a new, invisible layer of survival data. The Maasai remain exactly who they have always been, brilliant, adaptable masters of the savannah. As the night deepens and the cool wind sweeps through the green grass, the blue light of the digital world remains quietly hidden away, leaving the ancient, silver light of the moon to watch over the sleeping earth.